morning, everybody. Good morning and welcome to the Dali Museum. We're very pleased to have all of you here for another Coffee with a Curator. We are obviously here in the theater. There's an event going on next door, which is wonderful, and we are glad that we didn't oversell the room. So everybody has a comfortable space, and you're able to drink coffee, so those are great things. As always, we thank Cafe Gala for providing the refreshments for this morning, and hopefully you're all enjoying that. Today, we are here for our librarian, Shaina Harkness, who is talking about all of these items that are right over here. A project that hopefully many of you are familiar with, which is, of course, that Dali was not only a great painter, but he was also a great illustrator. And there are so many books that he was involved in commercially that he was hired to do very unique illustrations for. And so she's going to be showing us a number of insights into this commercial aspect of Dali's work on the commercial and illustrated books. So with that, please join me in welcoming Shaina.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. And of course, since I'm the librarian, I will be doing a presentation on books. Currently in the library, I have a section in the back for our special collections that feature these books. It took about a year to catalog them properly and for me to decide which illustrations to show. And also soon there will be an online or digital exhibition where you can find out more information about these illustrations in these books. So I've been busy in the library. First I'm going to start out, I think we all know, maybe we don't, the love that Dali and Gala had for books. We're going back to the 20s. Here we have Salvador Dali with a book he was always reading. Same with Gala. They had a huge collection. I think I mentioned last year in my talk. The foundation has about 4,400 of his personal books. This one was a staged photo, of course, and here's part of their library in their home. And this is one of my favorite ones. He has a slinky in his hand with this wonderful bookshelf, another bookshelf in his home. So now I'm going to start by talking two books where he made his leap into illustration. He was 20 years old at the time. Okay, Dali made the leap into illustrating books and magazines, which began with Les Briches d'Hier and L'Oncle Vincent. I don't know if anyone has seen these before. Maybe you're familiar with the Vincent at the top. I'll explain later. These two books are filled with vignettes and couleurs de lampe, inspired in noucentisme, with occasional touches of Cézanne and Cubism. So I'm going to have to read on my screen because I can't see. A Catalan cultural movement of the early 20th century that originated largely as a reaction against modernism, both in art and ideology, and was simultaneously a perception of art almost to that of avant-gardists. In 1906, Eugénie Diors coined the term, and they took on more of a classicist approach. Here are the front cover and the inside page of this book. Again, this is in 1924. You still can find copies of these books. It's very difficult, but it's still possible. And here we see these little vignettes, simple drawings. Does anyone recognize this up here? The cityscape, we showed it in our Disney exhibition because we do own the actual drawings for this book. But I'm showing you a copy of a book in our library. Okay, and then here we see Bharata's clownism, and Dali is using that So he's erasing pupils from the eyes, and this was Barada's particular version of fauvism. And here we see Dali is using this technique as well. Here's that cityscape. I really love, they're delicate, they're beautiful, and when you see them on the wall, like in Disney exhibition, and when you see them in the book, and you just try to imagine he was 20 years old, and it's truly incredible. Here's the tailor, the vignette of the tailor. We had this one showing as well. And then here's an example of a coup de lampe or tailpiece, an ornamental piece placed at the bottom of the page at the end of a chapter or a book. And in every chapter in this book, he does do a coup de lampe. Now, I'm skipping the 30s because there are a lot that he did in the 30s. He did a lot of frontispieces, but I'm going right into the 40s and one book from the 50s. Here's a collection from the 40s that he illustrated. And this was a time when Dali and Gala were living in the United States. So what a perfect opportunity. He was illustrating for American publishing houses, British publishing houses as well. And to me, this is a form of Dali's art that I can even own. You can purchase these on A-Books, eBay, various used bookstores. So this phrase, I don't know if anyone is familiar with it, ut pictura poesis. It's the relationship between the poetic and the pictorial. This comes from Horace's Ars Poetica, and it's a Latin phrase literally meaning as is painting, so is poetry. And Dali identified with this highly. This was a Renaissance theme as well. So to Dali, he was taking the words on paper and making them alive by illustrating them. In any of these publications, talking about these up here on the table, we can see how Dali put every care into expressing his artistic world. Now up here, this is a larger book from the Forays Don Quixote, but you can see he is involved with the process as he is with these books as well. He was very involved. With the illustrations he made for some of the great works of world literature, he does more than simply immerse himself in the text that particularly interested and attracted him, for he continued to penetrate into his own world, his own technique and iconography. And I will show you some of the Dali symbols in some of these illustrations. Here are the books that I'll be talking about. Again, they can be purchased. I own a few that I keep in my house, so I can say, yes, I do have Dalis. They may be books, but I'm a bibliophile by nature, so I think it's befitting. So we start out with Speak of the Devil. I did not bring a copy of that, but he did the front cover for that. It was published first in 1945. This is an anthology of sorts that includes writings focused on the devil. How many people have heard of this book? I knew it, Debbie. It's a fascinating book. I had never heard of it until I came to work for the Dali, and we have copies of it. Dali doesn't stop at doing the illustration, but follows the publishing process very closely. With this one, before it goes to print, Dali writes, "Important, this image must be reproduced backwards, so the back is in the right place. Careful, don't glue over the painted parts." So here you see, this was the original illustration, and he was telling the publishing house to print it backwards. So then you have this. And here, some of Dali's symbols, the eyes, there's eggs. But every time I look at this front cover, I see something different. This is truly a beautiful front cover. You can see the craftsmanship of his drawing. One of my personal favorites, first part of the life and achievements of the renowned Don Quixote de la Mancha. This was a modern library. This particular edition is the Modern Library, 1945. This one is my favorite just because I was one of those nerdy kids, singles, only child, and all I did was read. And at 11 years old, I picked up Don Quixote, and I was just mesmerized by the story. So from 1945 to 1946, Dali created 38 watercolors and drawings for this version of Don Quixote. There are several other versions. This one, like I said in the beginning, I'm focusing on the commercial, the ones that you can still buy today. One of my favorite drawings, it's as simple as Don Quixote and Sancho Panza riding along the road, and always in these landscapes. Here's Dali's iconography. He inserts himself into the story. Dali's interest in this book was most likely due to the personality of Don Quixote. Don Quixote and his madness inspired the finest Dali and thereby opened the door for him to apply his paranoid critical method. Has anyone read Don Quixote? Parts of it? It's truly an incredible book. Considered the first novel. And the famous windmill scene. I love how Dali perceives this. You even have the windmills in Don Quixote's mind, so he's thinking that they are the knights, they're attacking me. And you can, as you read the story and you look at these images, it just brings the pages to life. And you can see, the double images, the landscapes back here. Again, every time you look, you see something new. Here's another version, another illustration from this edition. You have in the clouds, you have horse and knights, you have a sheep in Don Quixote's mind. You have Dali's famous little beans that you can see in some of our own works here in the collection. This is a great scene. This is when it's found out that it's truly a woman, not a man. And we have eggs, we have the familiar landscape. Again, Dali inserts himself into the novel, not only portraying the novel, but inserting himself into it as well. Another beautiful illustration. You have the butterflies. Sometimes I get distracted and can't continue reading because I'm looking at the illustrations. And I think that's what, in my opinion, Dali intended it to be. And now we're going to move on to Macbeth, published in 1946. Dali had many Shakespeare. He had complete works of Shakespeare, so you know he read the plays. I don't think he haphazardly chose books. I think he did it purposefully. Here we have a repeating pattern, which some say apparently the letters of Dali's name layered on top of each other. It's on the front cover. It's in the inside. And it's in the inside again. And if you're familiar with the book Hidden Faces, the cover of that, you see some more of Dali's lettering style. But to me, the Macbeth is truly an incredible example of his lettering. This, and I have it show up here afterwards, come and look at the detail of this drawing. This depicts the Act 4, Scene 1. It's when the three witches are adding all the ingredients to the cauldron. And here's, the iconic drawers. You have the spiral. You might remember that from the Picasso show. You can email me and ask, and I can give you more information about that. We have the crutch, we have the key. This is a double image. If you can see, the cloak actually becomes a person. It's incredible. And even with a commercial book printing, you can still see the detail. Here's another illustration from Macbeth. Again, the detail is incredible. The hair, every strand is, put there purposely. And it wouldn't be Dali if he didn't, advertise himself. This is actually a picture of a radio broadcast interview in London, BBC journalist. So this was in 1951. So it had already been published in America, but England was going to publish it. So, I would like to hear the interview. I think that would be interesting. But here he is pointing to that double faced image. And then, now this is little known. I don't know if I certainly had never heard of this work until I came here. This is Essays of Michel de Montaigne. Here's a self-portrait that Dali did for the inside cover. And Montaigne was a 16th century philosopher of the French Renaissance, known for popularizing the essay as a literary genre. Now, most of us know that Dali considered himself a great writer, an essayist, even sometimes a philosopher. So it only makes sense that he would illustrate a philosopher's book of essays. He created 37 works for this for these essays, this anthology. Doubleday published a limited edition of 1,000 copies, which Dali signed all of them. You still can find some of them. So when you get home, or even on your phone, go on eBay, go on AbeBooks. Here's a picture, and they're titled by pieces of the essay. So this one's entitled Of Age. These are two figures, Democritus and Heraclitus. One of my favorites, that to study philosophy is to learn to die, and Dali illustrates it two ways. So we have the man holding this, kind of reminiscent of Hamlet as well. And here we have a bunch of grapes made up of skulls. And then the essay, The Force of Imagination. This is great. We have these two figures. They're skipping along. One has a crutch. This looks like a pomegranate floating. Kind of reminds me of Nature Mort Vivants in the fruit bowl. You have the spiral. All these Dali symbols, but this is to portray imagination. Of Vanity. Incredible. We have boat scene, we have landscape, And then here we have the moon, the solar system, and this disfigured figure looking into himself. And then we move on to another one, 1948, autobiography of Cellini. Okay, he was an Italian goldsmith, sculptor, draftsman, soldier, musician, and artist who wrote this famous biography. It tells of his adventures in Italy and France, his relationships with popes, kings, and other fellow artists. I was able to read a lot of it. Fascinating story. It could compete with any of the modern spy or crime novels. Here's one of the special editions signed by Dali, 1,000 copies. And he created 41 watercolors and drawings for this book. This is an illustration Cellini's talking about. He had great relations with the popes and the cardinals in Italy. And this was a scene from the book, actually 2 different scenes here. But again, the detail. And here, I'm going to have to read it off the screen. So Cellini says, "I had taken into my service a girl of great beauty and grace, whom I used as a model in my art, and who was also complacent of her personal favors to me." Sorry, no children, right? Okay. But he's depicting those 2 sentences. In this scene, Cellini's reminiscing about the old stories he heard his ancestors talking about, the family feuds. Well, more than a feud, obviously. Excuse me. So again, if you have time and you can get your hands on some of these, and again, come up here and take a look at the detail. Okay, and here he's depicting a dream that Cellini had. The Madonna and 2 angels were next to her, and a face came out of the clouds. And I have this front cover here. So beautiful. This should remind us of one of our pieces. Here, the woman with the rose bouquet head. This was Wine, Women, and Words. This was an autobiographical work by Billy Rose. It was his memoirs. He was an American impresario, theatrical showman, and lyricist, credited with many famous songs. Me and My Shadow. I didn't know that. It happened in Monterey, and It's Only a Paper Moon. And he met Dali at the World's Fair. And that's how they started. And then he asked him to illustrate his memoirs. Here's the inside front cover. Billy with the rose. Again, Dali's lettering. The landscape. So he created 15 original full-page illustrations, along with several smaller illustrations. There's 3 versions of this book. There's a London edition, which does not have the front cover of Dali, and it's missing some of the illustrations. And then the American publishing houses, they did the small version, and then they did a softback, which was much larger, so you can see the illustrations better. Here are a few. Little Col de Lampe here, even in a 1948 book. I love this one. This kind of reminds me of bureaucrats. You have it looks like a palette, but it actually has a teacup and a spoon. And this is an interesting, and I can stand up here and show you some of them closer afterwards. We have a pea pod with a handkerchief, and he's holding a gun up. I did not read this part in the book, but now because of this illustration, I want to know what's happening in the book. And some of you may know, As You Like It, the first publishing house edition was in 1948. It was an Italian publishing house. The copies that we have are a London edition from 1953. The publishing house decided to include Dali's drawings for the staging and costumes. This is what it had started to be. It was for the play itself. And then the publisher decided, we can use these illustrations and make another edition of As You Like It, using Dali's drawings and watercolors. Here's a stage design, and there's a book, actually an entire book on this play and Dali's role in the play. And you can see the actual stage production of this illustration. Here's one of the costume designs, and he says, my costumes are morphological and the better to serve my viewers, even prophetic. Here's one of the main characters, and when you see the pictures of the play with these actors and actresses in these beautiful costumes, and then you look and they are identical to his drawings. Here's another one of my favorite. And then those were all from the 40s. And then we have a 1954, okay? The truth about Lydia de Cadaqués. And those of you who are docents certainly know who Lydia is. I go into it a little bit here. This is the frontispiece of this book. He describes Lydia in a manuscript of fine bearing and well-rooted in living rock and the pure mineralogy, so that no gale could uproot her from Cap de Cruz. And then he illustrates that. So you have this tree that's actually becoming a woman, and he's depicting Lydia. Okay, so she was a Cadaqués fish seller who believed she was the character of Teresa from Eugenie Dore's book, La Bien Plantada. It wasn't until 7 years after Lydia's death that Eugenie Dore took any interest in her. She had been writing him letters constantly, and it was 7 years after that he went to Cadaqués and asked Dali, hey, would you like to illustrate this book I'm going to write about Lydia? Dali was elated, immediately agreed. In fact, he already had an idea that he was going to write a book about Lydia. Dali knew Lydia from a young age and used to listen to her stories. And later on, it was her who sold Dali and Gala the home, the fisherman's shack in Port Legat. So I think these illustrations took on more of a personal meaning to Dali. It's incredible. You have the separation, kind of like the rhinoceros horns, the drawers. Okay, so though these commercial illustrations provided an income while he and Gala were living in America, but they also demonstrate Dali's relationship with books, which were seen as almost sacred objects. Through these book illustrations and many other Dali epitomizes the concept of ut pictura poesis, successfully merging the poetic and the pictorial. There you go.